House Radio. Welcome to the Augury House Radio. Today we have Mike Firm as our guest, who is a musician and a community organizer, and he recently finished his thesis at PNCA. And he will be talking with Kevin, who is a CEO and one of the founders of Augury House, about his life, his recent thesis, and his current personal projects that he's been working on. And before we get into that, Augury House has been doing a lot of fun things behind the scenes. And although we have like a bunch of projects in the backlog that are just about ready to get released, one of the fun things that has already been trickling out on our Patreon has been a short series of some very informal and one-page scenes that are kind of a way for us to just make things on the fly, experiment with new styles and ideas. And these scenes will eventually, after a month of being on Patreon, they'll get funneled into our Augury House part of the Augury House website, which can be found on the footer of our webpage in the bottom right corner. And that's where all of our unfinished projects, incomplete ideas, and quick little tidbits of whatever kind of exist. And so yeah, keep an eye out for that. We're gonna have a lot of fun things coming to that section that will probably never make it to any officially released projects, but they'll make it to that little armpit of our website. And so yeah, we have a really long conversation between Kevin and Mike. They just kind of, it's a pretty deep dive into Mike's practice. And yeah, we will see you at the end of this episode with Lilith, that will have some final words on this for this episode 11. And without further ado, there's Mike and Kevin.
What's up? This is Kevin here with Mike Firm, and we're at Outside Issues Coffee House, which has been our new little favorite place because there's not many late night coffee shops in Portland, and that's kind of when we're like trying to do things and work on new projects and things like that. But Outside Issues has been so great because, like, one, they're like a mission-driven coffee shop, so it's like they're a nonprofit that supports people in recovery. But they also have, like, it's such a really cool space. It's in between a bunch of food carts. They got power outlets everywhere. There's like back patio, front patio, and it's just a really, really chill place and great drinks. Like, I have my blueberry cold brew, and then Mike has his
Fruity Pebbles something.
Yeah, Fruity Pebble Mocha, I think. Yeah, so it's been great. And yeah, so I first met Mike during his thesis project. I think it was through an Apano newsletter.
Is that how you found out?
I think so. You had like a little form, and then I filled it out.
Okay. That's how it works. Yeah.
But yeah, it was like really cool getting to know you and learning more about like your process and like where you're going with your work as both like an artist and like an organizer. And so yeah, so here we are, just trying to know more about it.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, do you want to go into like a little bit of your background, like where you come from, what you've been thinking about these last years?
Sure. I think the main thing to start off with is I am a Mexican immigrant, so I came to the States when I was 4, but I actually came as an undocumented person. So throughout like a solid 10, 12 years, I was navigating that with my life and with my family as well. And then at some point, because of some stuff that happened down in Southern California, we moved up to this small town called Roseburg. And if you don't know where Roseburg is, it's between, think Eugene, Medford, right in the middle. And when you're driving down the freeway, it's like 3 exits, so it's pretty small if you think about it. But yeah, so we moved there back in like 2008, and it was a very interesting experience because I had come from Los Angeles, and so the culture shock and the fact that I was just very kind of like an outsider in that space. You know, rural Oregon is very different from Portland in a lot of ways as well. But I was there for about 5 years. I went there the last 3 years of high school, then community college, and then at some point, President Obama issued an executive order to basically instill the DACA program, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And then from there, I was able to finally work and get a driver's license. Just a very interesting thing, things that sometimes people take for granted. Because like I remember a lot of my friends, you know, they were like 16 and they were like, yeah, like I'm gonna get my driver's permit, I'm gonna get my driver's license, and I was like, shit, I can't do that. So just a very interesting dynamic. And then as high school was approaching, as college was approaching, then the bigger question was, I can't apply for federal financial aid, so I'm gonna have to pay for everything out of pocket. So anyways, I figured it out working / with my family and friends, just being able to figure it out. And then at some point, I came to Portland to go to Portland State University. I wanted to be a math teacher, very naive back then, but I wanted to be a math teacher. And then at that point, I worked at this high school, McDaniel, here in Northeast Portland, and I did college access work. So basically, I had a case load of about 40 youth who were juniors in high school, and basically supporting them and kind of envisioning what was their plan after high school. And it was one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had, not because it was like physically exhausting, because I had done other like more physically laborious jobs, but it was just difficult because it was like I was like a counselor basically. So I did that for 2 years, and I still keep in contact with a lot of my students. It's actually really funny. This past year, I know about 5 of them that graduated from college. So 4 years later, they're doing what they said they were setting themselves out to do. And then at some point, I was there for another 1.5 years. I was leading a tutor program, and then I was also working at Reed College for a bit. That place kind of sucked, and I'm fine with them knowing that there's some articles there that it's not news to them how I feel about them, but there's a lot of solid people that were working there. It's just, you know, institutions. But now I work at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, OMSI, which, you know, a lot of people know, which is cool. But my job in particular, I'm a talent development and inclusion strategist. So basically, I do equity work for the museum. And it's very interesting because this is all me talking about my life and then my professional roles and all that. But amongst all of that, I've been doing a lot of organizing. I lead this collective called Portland Through Latinx Lens. We basically collect stories of Latinx identifying people, and we share them. We have a website, all that stuff, and we've kind of gotten a following, which has been really cool. But things have been a little dormant since a couple of us got really busy. So that's another thing I was doing, community workshops. We made some zines for the community. The list goes on, and then other stuff I've been working on. But more recently, and this is kind of tying to how you and I met, you know, I went to grad school. I'd always wanted to be an art kid. I never really had the opportunity to do so. And so, I went to the Pacific Northwest College of Art, PNCA, to get an MFA in collaborative design. If you ask me how to explain what the hell that means, I don't really know how to explain it, except that it's about working with people. And I think while I'd already been doing that, the main thing I learned through that experience was how you could use design and art and community organizing and equity and like all these things and combine them together, instead of feeling like art and design has to be this one thing. Art and design can be multiple things. You don't have to limit yourself. And so I did that, and I graduated recently, and interviewed you for my thesis, which was really cool. But I think the real power of my thesis is that I'm here sitting now with you, and you're interviewing me. And so I think it's that type of work is really a testament to how community should work, is that we're able to, not a quid pro quo, that's bullshit, but like more like, let me help you, you help me, let's do it together, let's thrive together type of thing. But yeah, so anyways, that's my trajectory. I already talked probably for a couple minutes. I don't know if you want to cut that out. I don't give a shit.
No, not at all.
But
we don't do much of that.
Okay, great. No editing, right? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep it nice and simple.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, that's kind of my life trajectory. There's probably some other stuff I could talk about, but yeah, that's the things that got me to where I'm at right now, got me to the place about, you know, who I am as not only like a member of the community, but also a designer, cultural worker, all these other labels that you can think of, and just how to continually amplify the connections and stories, especially here in Portland. You know, I know that people are always saying, you know, it's the whitest city in America, which is true. However, there are so many communities of color, and there's pockets here that, how do we amplify those stories in meaningful ways? So anyways. Yeah.
Right. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
And like one thing that really stuck out to me is like you've done so much like collaborative and like counselor roles, and I was wondering like, did you have like a really helpful counselor figure as you're like growing up that like
Hell
helped
no.
push you? Oh really?
Hell no. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. That's perfect. Like, so are you like becoming what you wish you had during those times then?
Yeah. Okay, I know I interrupted you and I said hell no.
Oh no.
But let me modify my answer a little bit. I didn't have quote unquote like really good counselors like in high school or college. It was actually, they were kind of pretty shit if I'm being honest. But I think the thing that it wasn't counselors in the sense of trained professionals. It was more about my family was basically my counselors, even though they didn't have the knowledge and experience to like figure out the whole thing about college or mentors. I guess I had mentors and family. So I had a support system that got me through some of those difficult times. But high school, my counselor was like, go to community college, which in the context of what I was dealing with you know, DACA and all that stuff, that made sense. Mm-hmm. But I kind of wish sometimes that they had pushed me more, or had been like, yo, you should go to OSU, you should, like, you know, trying to push me out of like that this is the only trajectory or path that I had. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I have become kind of the role model that I wish I had during those times, especially like I mentioned earlier, my students who have graduated, like I cannot take full credit for that at all, and I don't want to, but just knowing that I played a pivotal part in the way that they navigated that space, and then hopefully empowering them so that it's not me, but empowering them to use the skills and my own life lessons that I shared with them, so that they were successful. And while some of them took a different path, and that's completely fine, I'm really glad that I was able to play a part in all those youth's lives. So.
And it probably means a lot that you were like sticking around, or like, you know, staying in conversation, where it's not just like once they graduated, you know, the ties are cut and then it's like that. Because I feel like that's probably like one of the most important parts of being, or like an effective mentor, is that it's like longer than just like the program you're in. It's not just like dropping you in the deep end, like once everything's, you know, all the boxes are checked. So
the one thing I'll say though is that I did have to start setting some boundaries, because I get it when someone feels very when someone feels connected to someone because either the relationship you built with them or the trust, but at some point, you know, they were coming to me for things that I'm like, yo, like, not only am I not being paid for this, but it wasn't really about that. It was more about, you need to figure out some of this. You're becoming an adult. So not saying that you have to do it by yourself, but like there are certain boundaries that were being pushed that I did have to unfortunately set with some of them. But regardless, I think that I never wanted it to be like what you just described. I didn't want them to be like, okay, 2 years done, out, never see you again.
Right.
So for a lot of them, it was this opportunity to help them become their own role model and not rely on other people to give them that sense of agency that sometimes people need. So anyways, I was kind of coaching them through that, but yeah, and then I recently saw 2 of them. It was a little awkward though, because I hadn't seen them in a couple of years, but yeah, I'd recently met up with them, and they were I think they were trying to figure me out, just because I hadn't seen them in like 3-4 years.
Right.
And we'd message here and there, but I was really proud to see, one of them had recently graduated, and then the other, she didn't follow a traditional path. She actually went to go do other stuff, but, and they're sisters. So anyway, so it was really interesting to see the 2 paths that they took, but regardless, they're still 2 very successful women who navigated as a family, and who navigated stuff with some support from me, and to see them thrive is the thing that makes me happy. And I don't usually, I just realized I don't usually talk about that anymore. In the past I used to, but I think, some distance, some time has passed, because it's been like 4 or 5 years since I did that. That was like 2016 to,
oh wow,
and then 2018.
That was like ages ago.
Yeah, I mean, with the pandemic and all.
Yeah.
But 2018 is when they finished high school, and so it's been like 5 years. Yeah. So yeah, it's been really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to kind of set closer to your thesis.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about because I've had a little bit of teaching in my past too, but I was also doing creative stuff before that, and it's been really interesting to see how just the ethos of teaching just kind of directs, or completely changes your outlook to your own art practice, or kind of gives it a new shape, but but it's in a very organic way too.
Yeah.
It's just more perspective, more shape, and then more awareness of what you're worried about, what you're concerned about, where you want to hit.
Yeah.
So that's I bet you've probably been really feeling that, huh?
Yeah. I think the closest thing I can say is I had always been interested in music. To my thesis, I was always interested in architecture and urban design, urban planning, and all that stuff, but I'd always had to kind of put it to the side.
Right.
And so when I was working with these youth, in the moment I wasn't thinking about it too much, but I was kind of figuring out if I'm supporting them, kind of further develop their dreams, further develop their understanding of who they want to be or what goals they want to achieve, why am I not doing the same?
Right.
I mean, I just recently graduated, so it was within a year that I was thinking about that, but I was maybe I'll pursue teaching, I'll pursue a master's, but it wasn't until I think 3.5 years ago, I started reevaluating okay, once again, what are my values? What are the things that are important to me? And I realized that the piece of me that had been missing for a little bit, because education is important and community organizing is great, but I realized that artistic voice was missing. And so, I had done some music stuff, so my first mixtape and then the second one, but it always felt rushed, it always felt incomplete. There was never really I'm still proud of what I did, but now when I listen to it, I'm oh, some of this is cringe, but it is what it is. You gotta get
it out.
You gotta get it out, and then you'll create even better art.
Right.
But a lot of my music was really focused on my experiences, the experiences of the communities that I'm a part of and that I work with. And so then I was I gotta do more art stuff. I gotta really tap into my creativity, because it's a part of me that I've been not avoiding, dismissing, or just putting to the side. And I was you know what? This is kind of odd, but you know what? I'm gonna see if there's an art program out there that fits all of my varying interests, because I was I don't want to just do graphic design because, first of all, I'm not comfortable with graphic design. And I feel like I've gotten there a little better. I was like, but I also don't want to just do music because also, like, I got to figure out, are there other things that I want to do besides music? And then I found this program at PNCA that was, like, hitting every single thing that I was looking for. And it sounded very, like, innovative and, you know, all that stuff. But, so I took the plunge, and I'm glad that there was still a pillar of education attached with creativity, attached with social justice, all the things I was looking for. And I had applied to grad school like a couple years before that. It was more like math teacher education related, but I'm glad that that didn't pan out because my life trajectory would have been very different.
Right.
I would have maybe been on the East Coast at that point. But anyways, it was this moment where, yeah, what am I doing that is bringing me joy? And I was still doing stuff that was bringing me joy, but that artistic element was a key thing that was missing.
Right. And was that the program like a 3-year program too?
It's a 2-year program, so,
wow, so
I'm a little fried if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no kidding. So you have to like determine your thesis the year one?
Partially.
Oh, jeez.
So I did 2 things they told me not to do, if I'm being honest. Because, okay, I'm gonna say I'm a little bit, I don't like authority. Right. So like when people tell you what to do, you're just like, fuck you. But, okay, so I did 2 things they told me not to do. So it's a 2-year program, and they basically said, like, near the end of your first year, you need to kind of determine what your thesis is, right? So I was like, oh, okay. They said, if you don't know by the beginning of the second year, you are in for, like, a ride. So I was like, ah, shit. So there was that. And then the second thing, so anyways, I ended up, like, really finalizing my thesis, like, 1 or 2 weeks into the second year.
Oh, into second year.
Yeah, so I was like struggling, trying to figure out like what I'm doing. And then the second thing they told me not to do was basically to make sure that I didn't do my thesis work related.
Oh.
And I ended up doing my thesis partially tied to my work at OMSI. So I did the 2 things they told me not to do. But yeah, I kind of wanted to be like, you know what, no, like, I'm going to figure it out. Things will be fine. But yeah, no. And I'm glad that originally I wanted it to be more my thesis education focused. But then during the summer, especially near the later part of the summer, I started thinking like, okay, I'm here and I'm paying to come to this art school to get outside of my comfort zone.
Right.
So why am I reverting? And this is not bad or anything. But why am I reverting back to just mainly focusing on education?
Right.
I was like, this is an opportunity. I want to be here. I want to try something new. And then, of course, some of my old memories when I was a kid, like, I wanted to originally be an architect. So that started coming back to my mind. I was like, yo, like, what would it be like if I was thinking about built spaces, engaging with the environment, the built environment, all those things. And so I was like, you know what? And the chair of my program was kind of like, yo, like, you're cutting it close. I was like, yep, I'm cutting it close, but this is what it is now.
Yeah.
And so she was happy that I finally found something that was, she already knew I was passionate about education, but this was just something else that was a little bit more outside of my comfort zone.
Right.
So yeah, anyways, that's kind of how I decided what to do.
No, it seems so cool. Like, I guess to speak from what it felt like on my end, like going through it, like, I gotta say, the organization is just like, it felt like you had so much clarity. I don't know how much was like you figured out before you started like interviewing me, but it's like going from like the forms, like just getting like a real clear sense of like what you're thinking about, the themes you're thinking about before like we even went in.
Yeah.
And I remember you had like a really good like presentation. Like, and that's why I thought like you were like primarily a graphic designer because of like how everything was laid out. And I was like, geez, this it looks so great.
I'm good at, okay, there's 2 things I'm really good at. Faking it till I make it, and I work hella good under pressure.
Right.
Yeah, just know that if I seemed very composed, Jesus Christ, I was like the, what is it, grabbing the bull by its horns.
Right.
Because I was just like, shit, I don't know what to do. And, you know, that, doubt. But no, I'm glad that the way you experienced it was very positive. But I was a little scrambly or whatever, feeling like, oh crap, like, you know, self-conscious of my graphic design skills, because a lot of the folks in at PNCA are very like great artists and like visual and graphic design. And I remember I took a typography class, and like these first years in undergrad were like blowing me out of the water, and I was like, oh shit. And
that's how I felt.
Which is fine, which is good, because it's also like it's like a little bit humbling to be like, oh, if they can do it, I gotta figure out how to get to their level.
Right.
But no, I wasn't as composed as you might have thought. But I'm glad that that's how it looked from your perspective.
Oh no, because it was so fun, because like you not only like started with like the web like of what you already were talking to and what you're doing, but it's like there's so many fun like questions, like activities of just like how people are feeling about like the creative spaces in Portland. Do you kind of want to talk about like the
philosophy?
Behind the project?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back a little bit to what you asked earlier, is that a lot of my experience as an educator and working at a school, working at a college, all those things influenced how I approached the survey or the interview that I did with you. But the philosophy of it was really talking about this concept called space activation, which some people also call it placemaking. So thinking about all the environments that we're in, especially in like a city, and how it's kind of untapped or not being utilized in a way that it could be just more than what it is. So for example, the fact that we're in this space right now, this is space activation. Because some people might be like, no, this is strictly a coffee shop. And it's like, no, you have a restaurant who's like, yo, let's let these folks use this for a podcast. Let's have folks use this for a coffee shop.
Right.
Thinking outside the box, because damn, we live under capitalism, so everything's about making money. No, let's share resources, let's share spaces. But I think another example is, for example, here in this room in particular, like the fact that there's a bunch of art that is being sold, but not all coffee shops do that.
Right.
They just have a bunch of blank spaces. So what would it look like if they activated those spaces and highlighted local artists? What if this space was like an underground, punk rock venue, like it's those things of like getting outside of what is expected.
Right.
And for me, for my thesis in particular, the added component is how can we make sure we're centering communities of color to access those resources and spaces, because there's not a lot of that for some folks. And so, and it actually ties to stuff I've done with Portland through a Latinx lens, where I felt really isolated when I came to Portland, because I thought it was going to be a very diverse city, and then lo and behold, it wasn't. Because I was used to LA, and I was thinking like, oh, if I go to a bigger city, it'll be diverse. And then, no, it wasn't. Oh, well, it's diverse, but just in pockets, right? So it was this interesting dynamic of creating my own community, and we were creating spaces. We were actually doing space activation before I realized that that's what I was doing for my thesis.
Right.
And Portland has a huge arts community, but it's very DIY, and it's also very spread out, and sometimes people don't really know how to collaborate, because sometimes it feels like within the art world, people want solo shows. People don't want to do group shows, which I've always thought is kind of selfish, but
yeah.
Hey, that's a perspective, whatever. But that idea of, why do we have to do everything by ourselves? Why does it just have to be about one person? No, like, let's get together, let's share resources, let's make something together.
Right.
And so anyways, I think y'all as a group as well, like, you realize that there's power in being together and creating something that is informed by a group instead of like an individual. So I think that that's the type of things that my thesis was exploring. And so when you filled out the form and you learned about it and I interviewed you, like, I was like, I hadn't thought so much about virtual spaces, and that's what y'all are doing too.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's what my thesis is about, is really thinking about physical spaces and also virtual spaces and how they can be used to amplify different voices, different experiences, and then collective action. So,
Right.
so that's what my thesis is about.
Yeah. I'm so interested, or like, I love that point about the solo versus group shows, because I feel like one thing, or like, the reason why so many people like are, solo show searching, I guess. So show searching. I don't know stuff. But like, but
Make sure you keep that one in.
Yeah. But then like very group averse. It almost feels like scarcity, or like I almost feel like when I was at the reception for your thesis, I almost felt like that, again, kind of like when we were talking about like when you're doing your counselor and not like cutting it off after the project's finished. It seems like that there's like a natural next step of like maybe like what does a paradigm shift look like, not all coffee shops have like art on their walls, but it's like how do you kind of get that in conversations, or like how do you get that as more of an asking point? Like, does that mean you give artists like kind of resources on how to ask about that sort of thing, or is it like the other, like what way do you hit that from? So it's like I'm really curious like about how you're thinking of just like your thesis as like a larger project outside of just being like a university cumulative thesis.
Yeah, I think the most clear example I can think of is, for example, during my thesis, I interviewed like at least like, I interviewed at least a total of 20 people, but then I also had about another 20, 30 fill out like an online survey. And so for me, the way that I led, kind of like what you were saying, that it seemed very composed and very like intentional. Actually, I don't think you used that word, but that's the word that's what I was doing, is that I knew I didn't want this from the jump to just be a culminating thing.
Right.
Like, because that's another narrative with like colleges and universities. People are like, yeah, we do the big show, the exhibition after you're done with your thesis, and that's it. And it's like, no, this needs to live on. Like, what purpose does my thesis have? And how is it going to serve the community in a way that lives beyond the thesis or the requirements of the thesis? And so I think for me, all those people I interviewed, all those people I surveyed, I told them, including you, I was like, let's figure out how to collaborate. Let me know how I can support what you're doing. And so that was the intention that I led with. And then I think a great example, and you were mentioning this off camera, or actually no, I think you might have mentioned it earlier. There's this person named Jonas who works at the Portland Center Stage, who is working in an institution that has a big physical space, has institutional power. I work at a museum that has a big ass space and has institutional power. So when you have people who work in institutions who can kind of like ask around or be like, okay, well, this is a tactic I'll use, and I don't care if people know about this, but like a tactic I'll use is be like, interesting, you're saying you're supporting communities of color, but have you ever thought of XYZ? How come this is not happening?
Right.
And so then, sometimes in Portland, which I think is ironic and funny, is that you have a lot of folks that are very white liberal who are like, I'm not racist, and then you're like, so if you're not racist, how come you don't do like free community spaces for people of color?
Right.
And then they're like, I'm like, oh, okay, well, anyways, yeah, let's look into that. Like that type of thing. But, just knowing that not everyone can do that, not everyone feels like they can ask.
Right.
And so Jonas or me or any other people that work in these institutions, how can we provide those spaces or opportunities so that more people of color don't feel like they need to ask, because there's already someone who's doing it, or someone like myself who feels like, yeah, you know what, screw it, I'll do it. But then I know that it will help people, and give them a space that, or an opportunity or something that they wouldn't have. So for me to make sure my thesis lives beyond that, especially since I operate under working at a museum, is really making sure that I am taking everything I learned and then migrating it to where I work and sharing that knowledge with other people, because the insights that I've had to learn, maybe next time y'all are doing some event or something, you can be like, you know what, maybe I'll reach out to Miguel, maybe we can get something at Aussie. I can't promise it, but like, I'm gonna try.
It's worth the ask.
It's worth the ask. It's worth the, like, politics, right?
Right.
So I think that that's how my thesis will live on, and I think that not just tied to that group exhibition. And also, not to toot my own horn, I'm gonna give myself a little bit of praise in this, is that, I don't know if you remember the other people that were presenting. Right. A lot of their work was very individualistic, and that's completely fine. Like, no, not knocking that. Some of what their thesis was about was very personal and very, like, based on who they are, which I totally love. But I think for me, I was like, I'm going into this exhibition not to highlight what I did, but to highlight what other people are doing. So highlighting the work you're doing with Augury House, highlighting what Jonas is doing, highlighting these 3 people from RAC who are the people who review grants and are doing this community engagement work, highlighting Rebecca from Open Signal. And Open Signal is an organization. It's like they do really cool work. Bio, who runs his own thing called the Coalition Art Gallery, which is a small little art gallery, but he's doing amazing things that larger institutions don't do. My friend Molly, who is the co-executive director of Five Oaks Museum out in by PCC Rock Creek, like, it's understanding, like, here, I'm giving you the information, here are the people that I have kind of sort of personally vetted because our morals and values align and ethics align with each other. So now when people go there, they're like, oh, that was from his thesis. Like, these are people that he connected with and are in alignment with the values that I have shared with, for example, with you and other people. And so I think that's how my thesis lives on. It's about building collective power. And in that exhibition, it wasn't about me. It was actually about all the people that I collaborated with, because I didn't want it to be transactional. I wanted it to be centered in community. Okay, sorry, I feel like I just blacked out. I was literally like,
no, that's great.
So anyways, that's kind of how it lives on.
Right. And is there like a place where you have your thesis documented? There's like a website. I know you have an Instagram for it.
Yeah. I need to get better at that. I need to figure out how to put it out there more. But it's on my website. Actually, no, it's not on my website. It's on my IG, so Space Activation PDX, Space Activation _PDX. But I need to update my website and kind of put my thesis there. But yeah, people, it's open access, free resource, whatever. I can send it to people. Feel free to reach out to me. But I think I need to figure out how to disseminate it a little bit more. But yeah, and just know, like, here's another thing. My thesis, most theses are like white papers. So like just white background, white paper, a lot of text. It's boring. So for me, for our program, they said, you gotta design your thesis. And what that means is we had to create a book.
Yeah, that looks great. It looks really good.
Thank you. And that's the thing, is like, there's so many things that, like, you know, in academic circles, a white paper is like the epitome of basically like intelligence or whatever, like the standard, the norm. But I was like, no, like, I'm gonna make this because I'm trying to tell a story. And I want to make sure that people engage with my thesis, and you got to draw in people by making it look cool. So I was like, this has got to be like really cool looking, and it's got to be engaging. It's got to be written well. The data and the concepts I'm talking about, it has to be backed up. So I kid you not, like, sometimes I feel like, damn, maybe I did too much work for this thesis, like in my master's program. But I knew from the beginning, this is going to be a defining thing. And to make sure it's in service of everyone else, it has to be good.
Right.
And so of course I had to learn a lot of new skills, learning more, once again, graphic design, and I'd already done, InDesign for a bit, really learning how to use it when I was doing some zines, but this was like on a whole other level. And I feel like it was a good combination of like all my interests: education, music, community organizing, equity work. Like it was urban design, architecture. Like it was like, this is the thing that, one of the things I'm really proud of, and but I want other people to learn something from it, share it with other people. Maybe it inspires new ideas for folks, because I know you inspired me in the sense of like, what would it look like to engage people virtually? Like that's not a medium that I've ever really explored. It's definitely out of my comfort zone, but you sparked that in me, and seeing the things that Jonas is doing at PCS, like he inspired me to think, what if we had like live music performances, DJ sets at OMSI. My friend Lillianne, like thinking about the work she's doing with murals.
Like so good.
Everything's connected, and that whole culture of artists, just individual, about themselves. I'm like, yo, like why are we competing? We're trying to get the same bag. We're all trying to succeed. Why don't we succeed together? Right. Anyways, I feel like I went on another tangent, but yeah.
Oh no, I definitely feel that, and it's like once you get that togetherness, it's like a lot easier to expand outside of just like Portland too, and then get like that cross conversations between like other people and like across the state or even across like country lines, and just get like a really more just like well-rounded sense of voices and experiences. So yeah, I definitely agree. Like I love. Yeah, like we've checked out some of like LP's like interactive plants, and like those are just like,
oh yeah,
that was crazy to see. I think it was like installed in one of like the Portland like botanical shops. It's like, and then you have like interactive sound within it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, they use like copper bowls, I think.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know, like I don't know how they figured that out. I was just like, yo, like that's amazing. But anyways,
yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'd love to find a way to attach your, if you're down to like have your PDF of your thesis somehow linked within it.
Of course, yeah.
I guess we'll talk more about that, and then like that'll be like where all the other links for everything else will be, and then we'll have like your PDF.
Perfect.
PDF house somewhere, and that should be a lot of fun. Yeah, well, super cool. I guess one thing I wanted to also talk about as like we can slowly move to wrap. I don't know how long we've been here for. Oh, we've been here for like, it's 6:40.
Oh, that's fine.
So, did you want to talk a little bit about your music, the music that you've been doing, your actual artistic practice?
Yeah. So this is funny. So my favorite rapper is Lupe Fiasco. And he was I would say Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park was the person that really got me into rapping, but it was kind of like always like mixed with nu metal and alternative rock and all that stuff. But I think when I listened not to Food and Liquor, but to his second album, The Cool, that's when it clicked for me. I was like, oh shit, like I'd always really been interested in when I was growing up, I was really into reading, not so much anymore, but like I still read for work, I guess technically. But I was really into reading, poetry, and so I remember when I listened to that album, like I was like, this is something I want to do. And then I think for me, my first project took me like 10 years, because the nerves and trying to figure out like who I was, and then my writing style. Like I still have like old notebooks where my first raps and stuff.
Right.
They're pretty trash, but like in that moment you're thinking like you're the best rapper in the world, and you're like, yeah, this bar is gonna hit, and then you read it later and you're like, oh. But anyways, so my first project, and I'm also very because I studied math, like I mentioned. I tend to think about the world kind of in numbers and very like pattern recognition. And so I guess that's another thing that influences my artistic practice. But Okay, let me back up. There's a couple stories I need to set up before I share where I'm heading. So my grandmother, my mother, and I, we all have the same birthday. We're all born on the same date.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so
wow.
The three of us, November 18th.
Uh-huh.
Also, I'm a Scorpio. I'm a triple Scorpio.
Mm.
And by the way, astrology is not really my thing, but I remember reading stuff about it, and I'm like, damn, this is me to a T. Like, basically, what you see is what you get, and the way that I talk to people, like, you know that I'm not bullshitting type of thing, right? So anyway, so just have that in context, the threes, right? And then the other thing is that when I was trying to figure out like what my rapper name was going to be, especially since Lupe is like kind of like the caliber of rapper I want to be, I realized like when I was younger, my name's Miguel, and so I had this neighbor who his name was Steven, but his dad was named Mike. So kind of with some friendly banter, he would call me Mike, and I would call him Miguel, since it was the Spanish-English equivalent. So I remember that very like, and also, you know, like a microphone, so Mike as well. So there's that, and then the Firm part, Mike Firm. So Firm, Lupe got his name from this album, I think by was it the Fugees? I think it's the Fugees. There's this song that's called Firm Fiasco, and he basically took the fiasco part because he thought it sounded cool. Mm-hmm. So for me, taking the Mike part and then taking the Firm, since that was the other piece that he didn't take, I was like, Mike Firm. So I'm honoring when I was young, I'm honoring my childhood, I'm honoring people that are important to me by the Mike part, but then I'm also saying firm in the sense of like honoring like the type of rapper I want to be, aka Lupe, and so a piece of him influences me and all that stuff. And then also the idea of firm on the mic, so like, you know, holding the mic really firmly because you're about to rap, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So anyways, so I had to figure out who I was, I had to figure out like my stage name, all that stuff. And then it took me about 10 years, but I released my first project back in 2018 on my birthday, because, you know, I wanted it to symbolize, you know, like a whole, for lack of better terms, like a whole universe. So I was like, I'm dropping it on my birthday. There's 15 tracks, and the tracks at the end are 2 words. The tracks in the middle are 1 word. Then there's 2. Then there's the main track is 3 words. So a lot of symmetry, yada yada. And so that took 10 years to do. Then I think 2 years later, I dropped a second project called Man From Nowhere, and that one really talks about just some deeper stuff in the sense of like some stuff I was dealing with, like in terms of depression, mental health, but also like past trauma from like being undocumented, stuff with my family, figuring out who I was, all that type of stuff. And then I also was kind of thinking about these 3 projects, these eventual 3 projects, as kind of a trilogy. Mm-hmm. And so the project then that I released, I think about a year later, is called Flowers, which has multiple meanings. So it could be about celebration, it could be about death, it could be about new beginnings, all these things. And that one was 11 tracks. And I like a lot of symmetry, so I encourage you all to kind of take a look at the track list to see if you see any patterns, that type of thing. But I saw all of these as a trilogy because the first mixtape had 15 songs. The second one had 13 songs. The final one had, the third album had 11 songs. When you add that up, it's 39. So stuff like that. Like, I get really into patterns and symmetry. But anyways, so that was kind of like a lot of the music stuff that I did. And each time I got better and I got faster. And, you know, you gotta, 10,000 hours to really refine your craft. And then recently I dropped an EP, actually that was a year ago, but I dropped an EP and I did it while I was in school. So imagine I'm like working full time, going to school full time, decided to drop an EP.
Wow.
But then that was one of the first times I really asked for a lot of collaborations. So I went on Reddit because I had followed like a couple of, you know, music making threads, and I just put an open call and I was like, yo, I'm gonna drop an EP. I got some beats. Does anybody want to hop on them? And there's this track that has like 3 of us that we like all rapped for like, it's like a 5-minute song. I wanted like a posse cut, and and then there's a couple people who produced two beats on it. So, and that one's called Hurricane Season, and that one I was trying to get a little bit more like experimental in the sense of the topics I was covering. I don't think I'm a good singer at all, so like I tried to sing a little bit, which I think came out fine actually, if I'm being honest. But yeah, it's just things like that all my life influenced my music, but my music influenced my education, but my education influenced my work, and all these things are connected. So I like to move, this is the triple Scorpio in me, like I want people to really know who I am and what I stand for, and know that that there's more to me than meets the eye. And I think when I mentioned the whole thing about the second mixtape about trauma, for a long time I really internalized a lot of things and wasn't really willing to share. But after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. Like, I want to be the most genuine me that I can be. So if that means I'm a musician, if that means I'm a rapper, if that means I'm an educator, if that means that's all of me. I'm not just one thing. So anyways, that's kind of been my music stuff, and I've already kind of started planning out another album. I'm kind of like in the brainstorming phase where I'm just coming up with titles. That's usually how I start most of my projects. I kind of start experimenting, like what themes do I want to talk about, focusing on the titles, and then from there, then I start making the beats, and then I finally end up writing. But yeah, there'll be a new project probably in a year or so, and there's some people that I want to collaborate with. Yeah, so that's kind of what my music career is looking like. You know, you made me sign a contract. I gotta figure out how to do a contract.
I'll show you how.
Yeah. You said ChatGPT though.
Yeah. You just have to know what to ask it.
Yeah. You gotta know what to ask. Yeah. But so some exciting things to come, and you know, I've made my own music videos and learning how to direct those and ask for help so that people can help me realize my vision and also support their vision. So more to come on the music front.
Wow. So it sounds like you kind of do a little bit of everything, from like making the beats to rapping on them, and then like mixing, mastering probably.
Yeah.
The video, the cover designs. You did all of it, right? Usually?
Most of it. I would say like 80% of it. Mixing and mastering, oh God, every time I feel like I got it down, there's something else that I'm like, gosh.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I'm there right now.
Yeah. But there was one project, Flowers, where one of my friends who is one of the co-founders alongside me of Portland Through Latinx Lens. I remember she was showing us that she was doing these drawings on black paper, and she would use like neon colors and stuff. It looked really beautiful, and I felt kind of like, oh, I want to ask her. So I asked her. I was like, hey, just a random thought. I'm working on this project. Would you be interested in like maybe collaborating on it? Could I use some of your art for like the covers and stuff like that? And she agreed, and so she ended up drawing a couple of them. I ended up paying her for her time and stuff, and then I digitized them, did some modifications, all that. But I'm more of a, what's the word? I'm not good at drawing. I can't draw worth a shit. But what I am really good at, in my opinion, is I can make it look good. Mm-hmm. You know, like I use, of course, like a bunch of free shit on, you know, websites to like add texture and make it look vibrant in Photoshop, that type of thing. So that was one thing where I kind of semi-collaborated, and then on my recent EP, 3 of the beats were produced by other people, and then the feature. So that was one of the projects where I really tried to get out of my comfort zone in that regard. So slowly trying to be more collaborative, and especially when it comes to my music, and not feeling like I have to do everything.
Right.
But I did initially do most of it on my own, because I have this, maybe it's just the educator in me. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I want to know how to do it.
Yeah.
Because I want to learn how to do it.
Right.
But yeah, I'm starting to let go of that a little bit, to be like, I don't have to have all the knowledge. There are other people who can do it better, who can do it faster, and who want to help, or vice versa.
But I feel like having that experience of like doing it all, like I feel I was in a very similar spot, but it like really helps because then you know, or you get to the point in like each of the many things that you're like carrying on your back where it's like, oh shit, I can see what it'd look like if I was really good at this, you know, what I'd have to do to get there. Yeah. I'm obviously not going to do that. So it's hard to bring someone, you know, it's a lot easier to collaborate once you have that kind of perspective.
Exactly.
So I think it all works out.
Eventually it does.
Yeah.
You gotta mess up a couple.
Spend a few years is just I feel like music's tough because it's you know, listen in the car and then the bass is just like blown out, and then on the phone there's no bass.
Mixing and mastering is just, it's a whole thing, and like I said, I haven't perfected it. But what you were just sharing made me remember something, and this was pretty humbling. And you know, rappers have egos. I will admit, I'm always working on like my own ego, and just because like for me, like I've mentioned with my thesis and all these things, I don't want it to be just about me. I want it to be about community. And so I remember there was this beat challenge or something like that, and there was this guy who does like online like YouTube reviews of people's beats and stuff. So I submitted one, and it was a beat I was incredibly proud of, and I felt very like, you know, whatever, let's see what happens. And this guy like hated it.
Oh,
like
God.
He was like, what the fuck, like, and by the way, like streaming live.
Oh, geez.
He was
like
like,
the audience.
Yeah,
it's documented.
Yeah,
oh,
and so there's some video somewhere out there where he's like, yo, what the fuck is this? And then, and I got a little defensive, you know, I was like, oh, yo, this feels bad. But then, you know, he gave some good feedback. But in that moment, I was pissed because I was just like, I spent so much time. This is coming from the heart, all that stuff, and you know. But then I think it was like a week or two later, I really sat with my feelings for a bit, and I was like, what is it about this that's making me feel uncomfortable? And the conclusion I came to was, I made something that felt very personal, and it felt like an attack about my abilities and the effort I put into it. And so I took a moment to really reflect on that, and I realized like, yo, some of the things he said are valid. There are some other things that are not. At the end of the day, this art that I'm making is mainly for me and the people I care about. This guy, I don't even fucking know him. I just found out about his, you know, beat review thing. So I realized in that moment, also, like, maybe this is not the space I want to be. Like, why do I feel the need to try to impress this random guy? Is it about ego? It is. So in that moment, I was like, take a step back, and I was like, am I happy about what I created? And in that moment, I said yes. So I could give a shit less about what this guy said. I will take the good feedback he provided me, but the rest, irrelevant, because he doesn't know my story. He doesn't know where I come from. Fair enough.
Exactly.
So I'm sharing that story because I think that's also something that comes with art.
Right.
Is that people feel, and I get it, we get attached to our pieces, we get attached to the things we share, but you gotta take your ego out of it too, because not everything's gonna land with people. And I think that's one of the pillars of community organizing, is that you need to be able to work with people and take your ego out of it. You need to collaborate and take your ego out of it. And okay, this is the last controversial, maybe potential controversial thing I'm gonna say, is that Portland has a lot of organizers, has a lot of people doing amazing work, but sometimes some of it feels very performative or very like, I'm just gonna say performative. And so I wonder if it's about ego. And so like, it shouldn't be about, you know, the flashy things, like, you know, those people get their pictures taken and they're like, you know, protesting and all that stuff and marching and all that. But like, there's a lot of organizers that are behind the scenes who are providing support or doing amazing things, who are not as amplified, and that's because they're just approaching it differently. But it's about removing the ego, and so art and music in particular taught me more about that. So that's the power of music, and that's the power of art. If you're a great artist, it will teach you to take your ego out of it. So, anyways, a little philosophical, and potentially controversial, but
no. Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's like a perfect little tidbit to kind of start closing on. Yeah. And let's see here. We'll have all of your links in the description of this.
Yeah,
so
you.
That includes the Mike Firm, Space Activation, and then was it PDX Latinx?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, perfect. And then I'll stay in contact with you about also having your PDF linked in it for your thesis, and that would be super cool. Yeah, so this has been a conversation with Mike Firm, and hopefully like the first of many down the road.
Right.
And collaborations as well. Like we're also super down to collaborate with you on anything you're working on. And yeah, we're here at Outside Issues Coffee House, who graciously let us record here, share their space. That's right. And
mine's all watered down now though.
Yeah, but yeah, again, like super cool, mission-driven, nonprofit coffee shop, and we'll be sure to link their stuff as well. Yeah. But sweet, thanks for tuning in.
Hi, nice to meet you again. I'm Lilith, the Augury of Chaos. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please check out the links of Mike Firm in the description of this episode. And we also want to thank Outside Issue for providing us the location for this recording session. And also, don't forget to check out UGURY House. Thank you. See you next time.